You don't have to earn your peace. In this episode, Dr. Robyne Hanley-Defoe challenges the counterproductive norms around self-care. We dive into the guilt women often feel when prioritizing their own well-being, and we explore the essential practices that are not just rewards, but necessities. Plus, find out why some of the most resilient people are also the funniest. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm Natalie Tysdal. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. I'm a health journalist, a working mom, and passionate advocate for helping women take charge of their health, whether it's hormones, gut health, mental well-being, or fitness. I'm here to break down the facts, bust the myths, and uncover practical ways to feel your best every day. Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a cycle of pushing through, just waiting for life to give you permission to rest? Or maybe you've told yourself, I'll feel better once I achieve this or overcome that. I've been there, but here's the truth. You don't have to earn your peace. And resilience isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise, how you give yourself grace in that process. Today, we're diving into how to rebuild strength after hardship and find peace without any conditions. My guest today is Dr. Robyne Hanley-Defoe, a return guest and an expert and author on resiliency. And today, we're focusing on women and resiliency in particular. Dr. Robyne shares her expertise on building resiliency and how to support those around us who might be experiencing some difficult times. We all go through stuff, and listening to this will help you get through that hard stuff. Thanks again for being here. By taking the time to listen or watch today, you are showing that your health and your well-being really do matter. They're a priority, and that's something that you should be proud of today. If you haven't already, please take just a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if today's conversation resonates with you, share it with a friend. My mission is to help women feel their best, both mentally and physically. And the more this podcast grows, the more we can support each other on this journey. You are a key part of that growth. Also, don't forget to check out my weekly newsletters, packed with tips, insights, and strategies that so many of you have found helpful. And I'm so grateful that you have responded to let me know that. You can find the link in today's show notes or head to natalietysdal.com. Now let's get right to it because I know your time is valuable. Here's today's conversation with Dr. Robyne Hanley-Defoe. Robyne, we finally get to do this again. It's maybe been over a year, but I still have so many downloads on the podcast that we did on resiliency. And I love following your material because you just give me such inspiration.
Oh, Natalie, well, thank you for welcoming me back. I'm excited for our time together today.
Well, let's get into this notion of you don't have to earn your peace. I just did a whole episode on mental health and how we have to prioritize that. But why do we as women feel like we have to earn, and I do this to myself too, I have to earn that time to feel peace?
You're asking such a big question, and I'm working with groups. Yeah, I love it. And I've been working with groups all around the world on this specific idea. And what's so fascinating, the way that I often get asked this question is, Robyne, I feel guilty. Like if I was to carve out the time to do the things that I could do or ought to do that I know will benefit my mental health and my emotional health, but what happens because I feel so guilty if I do that? That's time away from my family. That's time away from community. Now, to be able to unpack this as a behaviorist, Natalie, we look at that idea of guilt and we say, okay, well, what is guilt? It's this idea that I'm breaking a rule. So the question is, if we feel guilty that we're breaking a rule, what's the rule that we think we're breaking if we feel guilty for looking after ourselves? And Natalie, what we've been able to see when we unpack this with people is so many of us, especially women, we grow up with this idea that I'm allowed to do nice things or fun things or things that feel good when I get all my work done. So for example, I grew up in a house where I was allowed to play outdoors with my friends once I did my homework. I was allowed to, enjoy some of these fun extracurriculars once I got my chores done. So what happens is we learn this system that we're allowed to do the fun things that feel good or things that kind of nourish us when we've done all the hard work. But as you know, as well as a mother, an entrepreneur, all the things that you are, our work is never done. So we're kind of going against this resistance that we're not supposed to do those things that are good for us until we've looked after everybody else.
Oh, boy. I like the idea. I give myself that if I get all this work done, then I can watch my favorite show or something like that. But where is that line? Because some of it's motivating, right? Some of it is helping us be productive. Where's
Yeah. Well, I think the difference there is that notion between like entertainment and reward versus the necessity of being able to do self-care in the form of like self-stewardship, which is actually part of high performance. So what you described there, like, yeah, I'm going to get this done so that I can enjoy my favorite show. I think that's different than saying, I need to make sure I get my 30-minute walk in the morning, because when I do, it actually makes me a better parent, a better partner, a better, community member, a better boss, whatever that might be. So thinking about these self-care practices as part of the good performance, it's not something that needs to be earned. The incentivizing it, like you said, like watching my favorite show or just maybe kind of taking it down a notch, that's entertainment. That's like hobbies, that's play. This is actually part of how we keep you from burning out, how we keep you from like getting sick. We want to make sure you stay healthy, which means we need recovery built in to our busy lives.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So let's talk about what those things are. The 30-minute walk. What are some other just essentials that we shouldn't look at as a reward, but instead a necessity? Are you ready to launch a side gig, maybe a small project or business? Need a professional logo that won't break the bank? Looka is the AI-powered logo maker that's perfect for entrepreneurs and freelancers. With Looka, you can create a stunning, unique logo in minutes without breaking the bank. Just answer a few simple questions about your brand and watch as Looka generates hundreds of custom logo options. It's like having a team of professional designers at your fingertips. So why settle for ordinary when you can have extraordinary? Visit natalietysdal.com/favorites and start creating the logo your side gig or your small project deserves.
Yeah, 100%. I love this question. So yeah, movement practices, right? And again, there's so much misinformation about what we should be doing or ought to be doing or could be doing. My invitation for persons is that if we can just get 7,000 steps a day, which you might notice is less than what often we talk about, that 10,000 steps a day milestone, 7,000 steps a day is decreasing all-cause mortality by over 60%. And what is unfortunately happening is a lot of folks think, oh, I got to get 10,000 steps a day. And let's say they look at their day and think, oh, you know what? I'm not going to be able to hit that goal, then I'm not going to do anything. So I want persons to really just dial into that 30-minute walk a day, which a 30-minute walk plus your regular movement will put you in that optimal place of health promotion, and also kind of minimize the likelihood that you're going to get sick for things that we don't need to get sick about. So that walk in a consistent way will give us a great return on our investment. Other areas is connecting with trusted people. And what I mean by that social connection where we feel seen and heard and we have that empathetic attunement activated, that fills up our buckets in such a meaningful way. So we don't want a day go by without us feeling a sense of connectedness.
Yeah, we got so far away from that. I just talked about that in a recent episode, that we've just gotten far away from that, where we all kind of just, stay in and take care of our own stuff. And we lost those, at least I see that in my community, that we've lost those connections because either we're too busy or there's a level of depression, and reaching out makes that, it exposes it more.
It does. Absolutely. So again, what I think is so fascinating is, this idea that we know that we'll get an amazing benefit if we ensure that, each and every day we have one real conversation, whether it be a loved one, again, a trusted friend, even in this context, right? Connecting with like-minded people that just allow us to, again, as you said, not feel quite as alone right now. And there's that tendency when we're under duress that we do want to retract, right? We do want to pull back, but that's when we want to lean in. So a good conversation with a loved one will give you a better return on your investment than a hard workout, which I think is so important for these really exhausted nervous systems, that the last thing they need is a hard workout versus like some tender conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the notion of vulnerability. When it comes to talking with a trusted friend, that it has to be more than just what happened to you today, what's happening this weekend, and that level of vulnerability to where you can get to the hard stuff, be honest about it in order to move past it.
Yeah. So I think what's really helpful is not everyone is entitled to that part of vulnerability within you, right? We don't have to give it to everyone. I just want to ensure that people have that one trusted person that they can share it with. So, you know what? It's okay that we have lots of what we call surface or transactional conversations during drop off, or perhaps maybe even at work. That's okay. But we do want to make sure that we all have that like 3 a.m. phone call, that no matter what, how difficult the world is, we have somebody who really knows what's going on in our lives. So that way we don't feel like we have to navigate it always by ourselves. So again, when it comes to that vulnerability piece, not everyone has to have that part of you. And I think it's actually a good thing to put up some guardrails on what we share and who we share it with. But we do want to make sure that we're not trying to carry it all by ourselves.
That's so important. It's a really good point. Being vulnerable is helpful in addressing your own issues, being able to identify them, but knowing who you really can share that with. What if you don't have that person? What if someone who feels so alone? You're like, I don't feel like I have anyone that I can be vulnerable with.
Yeah, that's again, I'm so appreciative that you're asking that question. My first invitation, that's when we see in the research, that's where that piece around our spiritual practices is so special, because that is available to us, right? We're able to find that, whether that's through, through prayer, whether through our relationship with however we perceive God, the universe, like there is that sense of interconnectedness, that oneness that's so important. So usually if folks are feeling very isolated, my invitation is to start even with the journaling practice, right? Just putting that something in place that allows you to get those thoughts and put them into the world in a safe way, which could be in that free flow writing in a journal, but also leaning into spiritual practices, because we're going to see a theme in a lot of spiritual texts where people have felt very alone and very isolated and found deep, deep meaning and purpose when they strengthen that part of their practice.
Yeah, absolutely. All of a sudden you don't feel as alone when you do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get to the real good stuff with you and your research, resiliency, stress. Where do you find, let's talk resiliency first. And by the way, I'm going to put the links to your books in the show notes, because they've been just life-changing for so many people, and your research and the things that you do in helping people find resiliency and learn to work through stress. But when it comes to resiliency in particular, what do you find people have that helps them bounce back after hard times?
Yeah, it's spending 20 years in this field trying to get to the bottom of it. It's like, what are we really talking about? And what's fascinating about human resiliency is when, again, working with people all around the world, none of us want to be in these situations that require resiliency. And what I mean by that is, telling somebody who's going through something very difficult, like, wow, you're so resilient. We don't want to be. That doesn't feel good. We don't want to be in this situation. So I think first, this kind of recognition that this isn't what we want. This isn't what we want to be signing up for. We never signed up for it. And that recognition that I have to make the next right choice, in the sense of, what do I do with the scenario? What do I do with the situation that I'm in? So I think so often there's this like deep tension around not wanting to be resilient, not wanting to be in that situation. And that's what leads us into what we call the theory of everyday resiliency, and those 5 pillars we talk about in that work, which is that sense of belonging, that perspective piece, that we recognize that there's going to be ebbs and flows, and life is hard and messy, and we just need to keep showing up. Also working with that realm of acceptance, focusing what's within our control and what's outside of our control. And the last 2 are having a hope practice, right? Being able to trust and lean into this idea that better days are ahead. And the last with it being the humor, which was a wee bit of the wild card in the research, Natalie. We never expected resilient people to be so funny, but they have this capacity to find expression. So they can, drop even a swear word we've seen has a big benefit on helping with our vitality, but just being able to find little micro moments, even in the storm, where it's able to lighten the load so people aren't carrying it with just two hands. So those 5 variables, that home team, perspective, acceptance, hope, with a dash of humor, is what we see people leaning into every day.
Yeah. Do you think you can learn these things? I mean, for someone who I relate, and I know so many people who they're going through the storm of their life. Yeah. And we never know when it's going to come. It could come at any moment through the death of someone, an accident, a job loss, you name it. We've all experienced some form of it. The last thing you want someone to say is, "You're so strong. I know you'll get through this." I'm so glad that you said that, because I've even had people say that to me where it's like, "Oh, you're one of the strongest people I know." And you don't want to hear that because you don't feel it at the moment.
No, exactly. Oh, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the cruelest ways that I see this show up when somebody is going through a deep, dark season, like you described, people say things like, "Everything happens for a reason." No, it doesn't. I know, no, some things are just awful and some things just suck. And no, there isn't necessarily a rhyme or reason for this. The question becomes, what are you going to do with the pieces, right? What are you going to do with the pieces of that blast radius of your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, and how are you going to forge a comeback, whatever that's going to look like? So again, I echo that sentiment. We don't feel very strong in that moment. So when people tell us we're strong, it creates even more of this friction versus recognizing that this is hard and this is heavy and sometimes none of this makes sense. But what we choose to do is going to really determine what our trajectory out of that season is going to look like.
Yeah. Okay, let's flip it for a second.
Yeah.
You're a friend of someone going through a hard time. And you recognize, and you don't want to say the wrong thing. I mean, how many times have we all been there? Yeah. We're like, I don't know what to say. So for many people, they don't do anything because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, which is the last thing you should do. Show up, but show up in what way?
So the way that I look at it this way is, let's say, for example, someone says this is the worst day of my life, right? This feeling is the darkest day of my life. This is the worst feeling of my life. If my friend was to say that to me, sitting with them, I would say, I believe you, because I believe the feeling. I know perhaps this isn't the worst day of their life, or it's not my place to judge the validity of the statement. It is my place to tell my friend that I believe what they're feeling. And so I will say, I believe you. When they say, I can't go on anymore, I believe that's what you feel like right now. And I'm not going anywhere. I will sit with you. I don't know what to say. I cannot fix this, but you do not have to sit here alone. And literally just having someone say, I believe you, is transformational. And when we hear people, for example, I was working with a group of children just last week, and, one mother said, well, my child came home and said, everybody hates me at school and I have no friends. And I said, okay, that's, kids say that, right? That's what they feel. And I asked that mom, how did you respond? And she said, well, that can't be true. You had this little friend over for a play date and you were invited to that birthday party. And I understand the intention of why the mother said that to her girl. But what that says, the message that the child hears is, you're saying that I'm wrong. You're saying that something's not right, versus, the child says, I have no friends. Say, hey, I believe you with that big feeling, but you don't have to figure this out by yourself. And as soon as we validate the feeling, it changes what we do next. So again, whatever the scenario, just knowing that people are believed, I think is so important, and it's empowering.
Yeah, I love the words that you just gave. Is I believe how you feel, and to really focus on that feeling. Such great advice. How many times we've all had friends going through hard things, and it's hard to know. I had someone tell me once, I am here in the valley with you.
Yeah.
And that's all I needed to feel like,
totally.
I'm not alone. We're going to have the mountaintops. We're going to have the valleys. As a matter of fact, it makes the mountaintops so much better, right?
Totally.
Okay. So that leads me to my next question, because I know you have written and spoken about this and expert in these things. And that is, do we have to have those real hardships in order to feel strong, in order to be resilient?
So this is so controversial in the sense that people often say, how are we going to know if we're resilient if we haven't gone through hard things to be able to build those muscles? And what I think is so important is this is where perspective comes into play. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if you're drowning in 2 feet of water or 10 feet of water, you're still underwater. So we might look at somebody who's going through something we might think it's simple, or we think, that's not that bad compared to what that person has gone through. But to the person who is drowning in 2 feet of water, that still feels so significant. So what I think is really important is that we don't judge others in terms of what that experience is like for them, because that might be the only thing they've ever known. So to them, it feels pretty significant. So what I think is really important is to spend our energy reinforcing, especially in our relationships, the skills that we know that are going to help people build a comeback. So what I mean by that is like, you know what, this might be difficult right now. And something that I know is you're a really good problem solver, right? You're really good at taking things, in a way that makes it more manageable, putting things in pieces, right? So reinforcing that language that, you're somebody who figures things out. Not that you have to figure it out right now, but you will. And I trust in your skills. I trust in your competencies. I trust in your capabilities. So to answer the question, do we have to go through hard things to be able to be resilient? I believe that our perspective grows in relation to our lived experience. But even those little hiccups and bumps when you're a toddler, for example, those feel pretty all-consuming. So again, just understanding the learning is messy, it's disruptive, it's meant to be. And I think we can develop compassion and empathy for ourselves and one another when we stop judging how much empathy does this warrant versus just recognizing it's people's lived experience.
Yeah. And it also makes me think, just because someone hasn't been through a hard thing, there may be someone who has been through a really horrible hard thing who's having trouble dealing with a simple thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I hear that often. I hear that so often, especially people who've navigated, as you said, very, very complex trauma and grief. And then all of a sudden they said, how do I have no skills to work with this difficult boss? Like, I survived an abusive marriage, yet here I am. I can't work with this difficult boss. All of our thresholds for what creates that level of stress, it's different. So perhaps you were able to navigate that very difficult relationship, but you were in survival mode. Like, you were in complete survival activation. And all of a sudden your nervous system starts to relax because now you're out of that situation. But we're going to be easily triggered by other situations. So giving ourselves lots of latitude, Natalie, that just because we might be resilient in one area, that doesn't preclude us struggling in other areas. And that's just part of our makeup. And that's completely normal and okay.
Yeah. How do you judge that? Like, I know you've spoken on this idea of the buckets, and maybe your nervous system is really overwhelmed at the moment, so the simple thing's not going to work. Give us that visual in dealing with things in that way.
Yeah. So in the book, Stress Wisely, the example I shared was this notion called stress buckets, which is each and every one of us are carrying around these buckets, and the size of our buckets are all different. We have all had different lived experience. There's lots of privilege in terms of how much our buckets can hold and whatnot. But also what I try to bring to people's attention, that in the bottom of that bucket, there's going to already be things there. And I mean that, like, for example, there could be a rock of grief, right? There could be a rock of an illness or an underlying health condition, which means that those are already taking up space in that bucket. So as your day unfolds and there's more things being added to in that bucket in terms of stressors, we want to be careful that we're not operating in such a way that things are going over the top, that things are kind of overflowing. So we want to make sure that we have some releases throughout the day to let go of some of the things that we are carrying, because our evenings and our weekends aren't long enough to be able to do a lot of that repair. So we want to have what we call just-in-time practices that allow us to release, to be able to replenish, to be able to then keep going, so we're not carrying around these buckets that are too heavy.
Yeah, I think that is, I like the visual. I mean, it helps me. I'm such a visual person that if I literally go, okay, how heavy is my bucket right now? I need to do a few things. And it also just helps us become aware of where we are and why we feel the way we feel.
Absolutely. And one of my gentle invitations, when you notice and you catch that awareness that these buckets are really full, that's when we want to do less. So often people feel this pressure that, oh, I got to do more. I got to find a way to, organize my way out of this, or think my way out of my stress, or, find the next diet that's going to solve all my problems. And it's like, no, what really makes the big difference is when we're going through a lot, we want to do less, but be very strategic on what that less looks like.
That takes us right back as we wrap up to the beginning of the podcast, which is you don't have to earn your peace. And I was listening to one of your recent podcasts and I am when I'm going through stress, I work. When I'm going through stress, I clean. As a matter of fact, cleaning is probably the one I do the most when I'm going through stress. And I think it's from, you tell me, I think it's from, I need that sense of accomplishment because 100%. I'm stressed. And but if I can just make all of this look good, I'll feel good about myself because I've accomplished something. Yeah.
For sure. So there's definitely an element of accomplishment, because think about how many relentless tasks that we have in our work that don't have finish lines. So having a clean kitchen is a finish line for sure. The other piece that I would challenge you to think about as well, Natalie, is that idea that essentially what you're doing when you're puttering, or maybe you've kind of pushed over to rage cleaning, and there's no judgment at all.
I love that term, rage cleaning. That cracks me up because I know I do it.
Oh, for sure we do. And I still remember one time when I was going through a little rage cleaning bender, Ava, our daughter at the time, they were so little. And Ava scooped up the cat, and she's turned to her brothers and she's like, everybody grab an animal. Mom's in a donation kick. And I have never donated a pet, I can assure you. But it was just this moment of nothing is safe. When mama hits that zone, nothing is safe. Literally everybody grab a pet. But what happens is it's also, if you think about it, it's this really gentle, steady state cardio, right? You're puttering, you're moving around, you're kind of getting some of that chaotic thinking kind of channeled into doing the task. So it's this little bit of steady state cardio. Yes, you're moving around, and ways that we can lean into that is to again, how do we biohack that to get an amazing return on our investment? My invitation when you're in that mood and you feel that calling is to keep it somewhat contained. So keep it to the kitchen, keep it to a bedroom or a laundry room or an entryway, because unfortunately what happens is if you get too deep into that practice, and let's say you start organizing, pull things out of that closet, and then you start to notice you re-regulate, now you're stuck in a mess and you lose that momentum to continue going on, and you lose some of your benefit and your gains. So again, just doing it in little pieces, tidy up the kitchen, say, hey, how do I notice, how am I feeling? Right? And just be no, I still have a little bit more restlessness, which we know is just displaced energy. Okay, so let's maybe tackle this space. So just do it in a way that's gentle and restorative, and it can actually give you a great return on your energy investment.
Don't create another mess.
Exactly.
Oh, Robyne, it's such a joy. I appreciate you and your research and all the information, the way you help people. Thank you. And let's not wait another year. We'll do it again soon.
I love that idea. Thanks so much.
And I'll put your connections to social media and your books and everything again in the show notes. Thanks, awesome. Dr. Robyne.
Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you for joining the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and at natalietysdal.com. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave a review so I can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next week.